Attachments in childhood are truly the groundwork for our beliefs regarding ourselves as human beings. Attachment styles are said to be somewhat dynamic, which means that they can change over time and they can change based on context. For example, the environment, circumstances, or type of relationship. In a secure attachment, you have the ability to develop fulfilling, intimate relationships, enjoy being with others. As children, we're able to explore our environments. We're able to rebound from disappointment. That looks like being able to self-soothe and self-regulate and also seek support. You also learn to trust. Again, you learn emotional regulation, impulse control, resilience, and confidence. In a secure attachment, it helps us to create a sense of identity. It helps to establish a moral framework of empathy and compassion and feel comfortable with intimacy and independence. Whereas an insecure attachment, this can manifest itself in several ways. You could become disorganized, avoidant, or anxious. You can develop a fear of abandonment or rejection in stressful situations, such as a crisis. You often lack a self-cohesion and unstable self-esteem. It's typically linked to anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as eating disorders. People with insecure attachments also have increased emotional dysregulations. In anxious attachment, there is a fear of abandonment and isolation. It's also characterized by hyperactivation when a connection is threatened. There's a need for constant reassurance because, that wasn't developed by having a secure relationship. A person is often preoccupied with relationships and unfulfilled needs. They primarily seek to regulate through co-regulation. Person with an avoidant, anxious attachment has a hard time trusting themselves as well as others. Typically, they're highly emotional, very dependent. They have a desire to merge with a partner, can often be labeled clingy or needy, and they ignore red flags and confuses lust for love. The childhood of anxiously attached adults sort of looks like having caregivers who are unreliable and inconsistent, loving and supportive at times, but threatening and cold, most likely abusive or absent at other times. Inconsistency of these caregivers led to the dysregulation and difficulty in feeling secure in relationships. Most likely the parents were inconsistently attuned to the child's needs, and care was pretty much unpredictable. Because the caregivers did not regulate well, the child also did not learn how to emotionally regulate. Parents were either insensitive or intrusive and more than likely overstimulating for the child. And the parents usually had an anxious attachment style themselves. How you can identify anxious attachment in children is noticing that the child doesn't explore much on their own. They're pretty weary of strangers. The child is distressed when a parent leaves the room. Child might be ambivalent when the parent returns. The child wants to reestablish closeness with the parent, but is also angry at the parent for leaving. The child may reject parents' attempts at contacting and connecting with them, and the child may also no longer want to calm down when they're in a state of distress. In disorganized attachment, love is typically a source of comfort and fear. There's usually a difficulty, again, with self-regulating, difficulty trusting and asking for help. Sometimes this person could be very unpredictable, confusing, or exhibit erratic behavior. Their life often feels chaotic. In relationships, there's often a push-pull dynamic. They're socially detached. There's a lack of empathy, and sometimes they feel lonely. There's a negative self-image and damaging self-talk. The desire to have a connection and intimacy, but they also stress and fear that causes them to act erratically, which usually typically pushes others away. These people typically have feelings that are overwhelming and confusing. They may be dissociated, numb, and detached from their emotions. And they also often have trust issues as well as difficulty asking for help. The childhood of adults with disorganized attachments sort of look like having a caregiver that was inconsistent and erratic, sometimes intrusive, and sometimes abusive or frightening, most times neglectful. Abuse, neglect, or abandonment may have been present. This often leads a child to feel confused and afraid in relations to others. The child may have felt disconnected from their self. The parent had their own unhealed childhood trauma, and the parent probably struggled to tolerate the child's emotions and struggled to soothe when the child was frightened. How you can identify disorganized attachment in children is noticing when the child doesn't explore much of their environment, when the child behaves in a disorganized and contradictory way with a mix of sort of anxious and avoidant behaviors. Children's behavior is often unpredictable, and it is difficult to sometimes calm children down, or that type of child. The child is often confused, anxious, more often than not dissociated, and unable to regulate their emotions as well. So the key for disorganized attachment styles is to become more self-aware of your actions, to explore why you might sometimes push people away. When you get anxious in relationships, to ask yourself where your triggers are coming from and sort of narrow that down. Try to consider how your childhood experiences affect how you show up in relationships today. What about your childhood is who you are, who you might be in a relationship with today, and resolving that past trauma is very important to healing disorganized attachment. When you form a secure attachment with a trusted person and you are able to learn safety and trust in a relationship, you also learn how to self-soothe, you learn how to regulate, and you also work on improving your communication skills, basically reworking and unlearning unhealthy patterns that were taught, which will be a healthy part of learning how to process your trauma. Children's biggest need is to receive love from a parent. In order to receive this love, children oftentimes have to deny unconsciously parts of themselves or their reality. An example of that would be a child coming in and being so excited about starting gymnastics and, oh, mommy, I want to do gymnastics, and that mom saying, you can't do gymnastics, you don't even eat healthy, you don't even eat right, all you do is eat cheeseburgers, you don't even want to do what you're supposed to do, how you think you're going to be this big and go do gymnastics? And so what you did is you shut down that dream. And in order to do gymnastics, what that child has now learned to do is unconsciously deny part of themselves. So if there was a part of that child's self that felt like that they could do gymnastics, eating cheeseburgers, and being at a certain weight, then now they know that they can't do that because you have shut them down. Now, that could have been done in a positive way.
A positive manner would have been to structure the conversation around validating the child's wanting to attend gymnastics classes, but also letting them know what the rules would be to do that. So if the rules are you have to eat your vegetables every single night in order to attend gymnastics, then that would have been a more constructive way to do that. So that way you don't have the child denying parts of themselves or necessarily feeling like they have to shut down in order to receive love from you as their parent. What happened when you told your parent that you wanted to do something or that something so grand was going to happen to you and they shut you down? And now as a way to deal with that, you've decided, well, I just won't say anything, or I just don't want to do that anymore. Okay, so most often children have to deny or repress parts of themselves and their reality. And this is because oftentimes parents themselves were raised by people who denied their reality as well. So like I said, we got to break this down, and we got to get to the point where we can heal. We have to make sure that we're not repeating cycles but yet breaking them. When a child is unable to trust, what happens is that they will betray themselves in order to stay safe. So if I can't trust you in supporting my reality and in uplifting my reality, and not necessarily always blindly, going into my reality and saying, oh yeah, you can do that, and I can't. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. But when I say I failed and I have a scrape on my knee and you say, oh no, you didn't, go on and get out of here, you ain't fall. Yes, I did. Okay. So children will oftentimes suppress those things. They'll say, well, you know what? I'm not even going to tell my mom about what happened today, because in order for me to feel like this actually happened, because I know it did, I can't say anything. I can't tell her that happened. I can't tell my dad that happened. They're not going to believe me. So in order for me to stay safe, I just won't say anything. And that's when all the feelings get bottled up. That's when we look for the people that we can talk to. They might not be the right people, but then again, who are the right people if it's not my parents? So an example of that I want to share with you guys is my own relationship with my biological mother. Growing up, my biological mother was not present in my life. I have heard stories that she wanted to be, but she just did not have the tools necessary to do so. So I always wondered why my brothers and sisters were always, privy, why they could live with her. What did I do that I can't live with my mom and my brothers and sisters can? I was always told that she had always done certain things. She was this kind of person. She had done X, Y, and Z, and it was safer for me to be living where I was with my grandmother at the time than it was to be living with my biological mom. Like I've said in other segments, my grandmother made me make her a promise that I would be, better than my biological mom by going to college and going to school. And I never really knew what that meant, to be better than her. Subconsciously, my beliefs about myself were to be better than my biological mom. And so I've always been hard on myself. I've always thought that I had to do something. If I was going to go through this type of scrutiny, I didn't want it. I was told all my kids were going to be by different men like my biological mother, that I was just off the chain, much like she was. And so most of that kind of pulled me in when I would find myself going astray, like, oh, you acting like her again. They're going to have a lot to say if you don't, and in my mind, it was everybody. The world would have a lot to say if I didn't pull myself back in from being like her. So my childlike self dealt with this by making sense of my biological mom's inability to be present by not dealing with reality. I didn't deal with it. I was very depressed. I did not eat. I slept a lot. If I could sleep the day away, I would. If I didn't have to deal with nobody, telling me that I couldn't do certain things, or that's not your mother. Why are you living here? That's not your mother. Why are you, calling my mom? I just said I don't want to be bothered with it. I didn't want to be bothered with it. I didn't want to be bothered with it. I just didn't want to, I didn't want to face reality, and so healing and accepting my inner child reality would prove to be the hardest thing ever. And it actually wasn't until I got in grad school that I could begin to start doing that work. And so going forward, what I want each and every single one of you to do is take a couple of steps back and look at your attachment styles to your parents. Once you've done that and you've come up with what that attachment style looks like and how it could have possibly gotten that way, look at your children and ask yourself, what is your attachment style to your child now? And how could you possibly be denying your child's reality now? How could you fix that? Because we can always reframe our parenting and we can always reparent ourselves, and I'll go into that a little bit later in some other segments. But we can always reframe it, and it's never too late. Never too late to reframe your parenting, because human beings have three wants, three strong desires, and that's to be seen, heard, and loved. So it's never too late to reframe your parenting, okay? Ask yourself what your attachment style looks like with your child. Are you denying your child's reality? Could there be another way to construct your criticism toward your child and what it is that they want to do? Could there be other ways of having a conversation around your child and how they feel, and when they bring it to you, your response to those feelings? This is Black Mental Health, a Systemic Approach. I am Tiana Smith, MSW. Again, as always, I want you guys to love yourselves, do the work, don't be afraid to heal.